Good afternoon. My name is Farah, and I'm the CEO and founder of InfoStreet. And today we're going to talk about making money with the cloud. So I wanted to give you a brief background about InfoStreet. What we do is we provide cloud applications to tens of thousands of users. And we have been in business since 1994, believe it or not. The way this all came about was that I used to work for Steve Jobs for 6 years at a company called Next, in between his two stints with Apple. And over there, we had a really amazing operating system. That's actually the one that you are using on the Apples today, believe it or not. And we were 20 years ahead of our time. But on a daily basis, we got beaten by Microsoft with Windows 3.1. Windows 95 wasn't even out yet. So it was very, very frustrating. So I was thinking one day, what operating system will beat Microsoft Windows at the desktop? And the answer I came up with was no operating system at all. So I set out in 1994 to create an operating system in the cloud, before the words cloud, software as a service, even before CGI was a phrase that people would use. So as you might imagine, it was quite a bit early. We do get accolades for being visionaries and early thinkers, but if I would trade those for the scars and any day. But the net of it is, since 1994, all we've done is software as a service. We've never ever shipped one thing that is not cloud-based. We are a privately held company. We're profitable, and we've had a number of accolades in terms of our company's success. So what I thought we would do is we review where we are today and kind of review where there lies an opportunity for us. So if we look at today's user explanation of what a cloud is very different than what you might have heard 2 or 3 years ago. 2 or 3 years ago, as with all technologies, they always start in geekdom. And geekdom has a different definition for the technology. And when that technology makes it to mainstream, it no longer has that definition for geekdom. Meaning that in, let's say, 2 or 3 years ago, if you talk to anybody who knew about cloud technology, they would think of cloud as hardware as a service, similar to the Amazon cloud that they know. And there was also software as a service that rode on top of cloud. But today, because of all the advertising that you see on TV and every single magazine that has cloud in it, in fact, there's upwards of 20 or 30 articles on the cloud on a daily basis that gets emailed to me, believe it or not. And because of that, cloud has taken a new meaning, and that is for the small businesses and for the average public, cloud has the meaning that if it's not on-premise, it's in the cloud. So if I don't physically see the machine in my office, it belongs to the cloud. And that's the definition of cloud, and that's the one that's sticking. So it's no longer hardware as a service, separation of software as a service. Anything that is not on-premise is viewed as a user by cloud. And on top of that, it used to be that cloud was for people who had remote employees. So they used to think that, okay, I have this salesperson in Florida and I have another one in Boston, so I need to use a cloud service so they could get the CRM and all be on the same page. But in reality, what has happened is that there are so many good technologies that are now 100% cloud-based that people are using cloud services for people all under one roof. So employees of a company, let's say an insurance company or a law firm, they all come to the office and they use the calendaring system and they use the case management system from the cloud, all from within the office. And the reason is that pretty much everything that they need to use on a daily basis is available on the cloud and also get in there. And we all know the benefits of the cloud, so I'm not going to bore you to death with all the details of that. But the reality of it is that it has become an explosion. So with every explosion, there's the flip side of it, is the supply side of it, is the developers out there, and the developers looking at what are they doing and how are they delivering product. And it turns out the traditional way is way too costly, and not only is too costly, it's not competitive. You cannot have a solution where you could release every 6 months or every 9 months, and you have to go through a QA service and check it against Windows 7, Windows XP, Vista, all sorts of things. It's just not acceptable anymore when all of your cloud service people, they are providing solutions on a weekly basis or every other week or so. Besides, you would have to manage several versions, where in the cloud version, there's only really one version out there. And all you need to do is you need to make sure that it's working on the browser, and as if it works on the browser, it works on any platform. So the whole idea, the vision of a OS is irrelevant that made me start InfoStreet is finally coming to a reality. And the other thing is that people are finding competition from unlikely sources. Like if you went 3 or 4 years ago and you looked at, you don't even have to go back a decade, just 3 or 4 years ago, and you looked at your software, you wouldn't have somebody who would come out there and just provide, let's say, a software to, I don't know, remodel the kitchen, or just provide a software to do invitation to a party. But nowadays there's mini software. And mini software, somebody's going to pay $7 a month and they're going to use it, and they're going to use it for 3 months, and they're going to pay $21 and be done, and they spend $4,000 on this party and this event. $21 is a no-brainer, and they dump it, and the next year they use something better. So they're no longer going to go spend $85, go to Best Buy or somewhere and buy a product, go install it on a server, fuss with it, make sure it works, call customer service, all that kind of stuff. It's mini software, it's software for rent, and it's getting to go. So the developers who are in the traditional business, they recognize this as both a plus and a minus. And everything in life, my motto is every good thing in life is the same. Basically, the best attribute and the worst attribute of everything is the same. The best attribute is they get to benefit from the cloud, but the worst attribute is they have to now live in this ecosystem and they have to compete with it. So what happens is also cloud is no longer just software. Cloud is also a billing model change. And the same way as the car system got completely turned upside down with the advent of leases, that the software licensing and contract model has gotten completely upside down. So what happens is now they have a lot more clients, but they are making less money per client. And so they are safer in the fact that if you had if you have even five clients that each paid you 100 grand a month, if one of them went away, you're looking at 20% of your revenue, and you're probably looking at laying off some people. But if you had 1,000 customers that paid you $500 a month each, 10 of them could go away and you would have no layoffs. So there's a substantial safer attitude with the cloud. But the problem is that what it takes to sell and what it takes for you to create the 2 words that are dreaded by every new entrepreneur, and those are critical mass. But what it takes for you to get there is sometimes not worth the effort. And it's very uncomfortable and very unfamiliar to many people. Oddly enough, younger people who don't have a previous exposure and unlearning to do are doing much better. I remember at one point in 1999 or so, we had a cloud-based solution, but we were selling it based on the traditional model of $100,000 in installation. And we changed our model to 10 cents per user per day. So I was used to getting checks at $100,000 a piece. Now it's getting checks at $22 a piece. And I can't tell you how uncomfortable it was, but I felt that it was a life change that I had to go through, similar to like a diet plan, if you will. So we talked about sales, so we should think about what are the different ways the sales are happening. So the sales are basically, there's 2 ways to do it. You either sell to a lot of people and you have it very expensive, very cheap, or you sell it to very few people and you have to have it expensive. There's really no other model. I mean, there's all sorts of hybrid models, and we're going to talk about resellers and talk about how the cloud could be your reseller and all that kind of stuff in this talk. But in reality, these are the really 2 models. And if you want to be in the cloud business, you need to be comfortable with the idea that you have to have low dollars, but basically the average revenue per sale is going to be low, but you're going to have high volume. So if you're not prepared for the high volume, you don't really belong in the cloud business. You're not going to do well. And the idea here is we're going to talk about what are some of the ways to prepare for that high volume. So if we look at the enterprise sales model, where it's the low volume sales, you basically have a relationship with a customer and you're selling through that relationship. And for that relationship to cherish, you need to have suits that fly around. You need to have taken people to lunch, bought expensive wine, shaking hands and whatnot, and make sure that they like you, because if they don't like you, they're not going to like your product. And that is the model for the enterprise sales model. But as we talked before, the client concentration, which is actually a term that the accountants use, is a danger that if you have a few clients that are paying, each of them are paying more than 20, 25% of your revenue, then you have a problem if that client goes away. But these people, even with the enterprise sales model, they still could use the cloud as a delivery model, meaning that just because you have salespeople doesn't mean that you have to give them a CD for an installation. You can still have an enterprise delivery, but you have a relationship and the sale is actually happening through that relationship. Because these relationships develop and nobody kind of marries you on the first date, it happens, but it doesn't last that long. Sales cycles are very long. So you have to also be prepared or have deep enough pockets to handle some of these things. I have several clients that are $1 billion plus, and I could tell you that on average, the sales cycle with them is 14 months, where you have clients that are, let's say, 20 people in the company. Sales cycles are probably about a month, month and a half. But if you have clients that are 100 people in the company, sales cycle will be as short as 3 days. I could explain that in a second. So when we go to the consumer and sales, to the small business and consumer, the idea is that price per sale must be small. It just stands to logic that if you're going to reach a very wide audience, the very wide audience cannot afford a high price tag. You do not see Rolls-Royce putting advertising on college campuses. They have very distinct places in the American Express Platinum magazine, in the wine clubs or whatever, because they want to reach their own audience. By default, when you want to reach a wide audience, you have to lower the affordability bar. And therefore, you would see tons of advertising for Kias and Hyundais and Nissans in college campuses, but you never see high-ticket items. And the second piece to that is you need to get to a lot of people. So if you had a low price product at $2 a month or $3 a month, and you reached only maybe 10,000 people, you're not even paying the rent. So we're talking hundreds of thousands of people before you're going to be sleeping well at night. The other thing is, if you're going to do this, you can't afford very long sales cycle. Now, I just alluded to the fact that sometimes very small businesses, they actually take longer to make decisions. And part of the reason for that is very small businesses, the entrepreneur and the founder is the person who's writing the check. So they see this as a personal purchase. So if you don't have the ability for them to see the value to them immediately, they're going to be taking just as long as a larger company, but in a larger company, you're going to get 20, 30, maybe 100 times more return on your investment. But on the smaller company, you have that cost of customer acquisition that's going to be unbearable. If you're charging somebody even $10 a month, and you take more than a couple of days to have that person close, and if they even ask one question from your support, you are not making money off of that person for at least 2 years. So if they don't stay with your product for 2 years, you have lost money on it. You're upside down. Because you got to remember that even though the customers are small, they all expect to have a relationship with you. So the problem as we saw it, they're really threefold. And the last one is actually something that is very, very applicable to people in this room. And that is, the idea is that people already have painstakingly established a relationship with customers, and they now want to sell more and more to that customer. So how do you do that? How do you go ahead and get your customers to buy more from you? And the idea is that if we don't have a good product that is long-term, the customer acquisition cost is going to be very, very high, and we're going to be in pain. So many people have gone and tried to outsource the relationship to resellers, but the average company out there has 2,000 resellers and about 10 of them that are active. And the rest of them, they just sign the contract to say, yes, we carry this product. But if they don't have your product embedded in their solution, there is no sale. Meaning that if you go to McDonald's and you are having ketchup, you are using Heinz, and you may have not bought Heinz by yourself, but because it's embedded in McDonald's or Burger King's product, they are a reseller of Heinz, and they're a very successful reseller of Heinz. So what we need to do is now apply that to your market and how it works for you. So the big dilemma happens today for people is like, well, how do I do this? How do I reach a very large clientele? How do I make sure that they have a relationship? How do I shorten that cycle? How do I make even the $3 a month worth it so I don't have to argue with somebody over $3 a month? And believe me, people will call you and call your support and ask you a question for a $3 a month thing. And I'm often thinking, like, you know, if it was $20 a month, I personally wouldn't have time to call, but people do call. I guarantee you they do. And you know, what happens is also you're on a daily basis competing with other people, like people here in some way, direct or indirect, are competing with Google Voice. Or they might be competing with a solution that Adobe is offering. Or one of these open source projects becomes a sale to one of the bigger companies, and the direction goes in the direction that you don't necessarily want it anymore. So on a daily basis, you're competing with people that you're not sure how you could compete with. Google probably has more people working on their Google Voice product than the entire population of this hotel at this juncture. So how do you compete with that if you're a 4-person company? So these are the dilemmas that an entrepreneur has in a given market. And so how do you want to go about solving that? So what I could do is I could share how we have gone about solving that. And we, you know, we're not a Google, obviously, but by many counts, we've been successful in our small size. So the way we've done it is our solution to everything is automate, meaning that if we can't automate it, we're not going to survive. And if you go to our company offices, in the kitchen wall, there's a big board up there saying only 10% of our employees are human. For the rest, we employ technology. So we automate everything so we be able to compete with other companies. We have more than 100,000 users in our system, and we have half a person doing support. Literally a half-time person doing support. We could not have done that without automation. But we were challenged throughout the years. People saying, well, you could automate technology, but you can't automate sales. So we set out to automate sales. So how do you do that? You have to automate your relationships. You have to automate how you're going to expand. And you're going to automate how you're going to reach people. And finally, you have to automate that close. So I'm going to put a slide on any one of these and discuss it in detail. And probably at the end, we'll have a Q&A. And if I missed anything, I'd be more than happy to address it. So how do you want to automate relationship? Basically, it starts with the need. Nowadays, whether we like it or not, the frivolous impulse buying is not happening. Meaning that if a company doesn't see that your product is absolutely fulfilling the need, they're going to go use some sort of a free knockoff of it. They're not going to pay you money. It's that simple. So you need to be addressing the need. And you need to be able to differentiate and articulate that need. And the other thing is you need to make sure that you are having a product that allows the customer to have a relationship with your product, not with you. So Steve Jobs didn't know every iPhone owner, but every iPhone owner is in love with their iPhone. And you know, there are people who are in love with their BlackBerries and with their Android, and there's all sorts of religious camps forming. But all I know is within every one of those product bases, people are in love with them. And they don't know the person who heads BlackBerry or Android, but they're in love with the product. And one of the ways they're in love with it is because they can mold the product to their use. So if you could find a product that is not do it my way or hit the highway, you are going to have a bigger chance of a relationship. Just think of it as a significant other relationship. It's the same way. A one-way relationship doesn't work. You got to see what's in it for me, and you got to see does it threaten me, and you have to have the right balance of those. So the other thing to think about is automate expansion. And that one is a tougher one because you only have 5 people working for you in the development area. How the hell am I going to compete with Google? Well, the answer to that is don't compete and be partnership ready. Be able to take less money and partner with other people and let pieces of other people fill out your voids. And I'm actually going to talk about this in a little bit more detail pretty soon. But you got to think about competition is your best friend. If somebody steals your customer, you have lost 100% of that revenue. But if you figure out a way to do competition with them, if you could get 20% of that revenue, 20% is a lot larger number than 0. So that's one way to look at being partnership ready and doing competition. So automate reach. The biggest challenge here is if I have the coolest widget in the world but nobody knows about it, it's not going to happen. So one of the things that we need to do is we need to be getting exposure. And one of the ways to get exposures nowadays is to be part of app markets. And this could be whether you build a little cloud app that sticks to your asterisks, or you actually do a entry in there. But the reality is those are the places where people go and do their purchases. And basically, when you find that place to reach, you also are getting another benefit from it, is because what happens is when people come to buy, nobody's a strong word, but most people don't come and say, I want to buy a whole suite that does this and does that and that does the other thing. They normally come in and to buy one solution that's going to fit their need. And at that point is when they get the chance to look at the other solutions. And if you are one of those complementary solutions, or if those complementary solutions are in your suite, you have a chance to be in that person's face for that sell. So basically, once again, it's all about people. In other words, in this day and age, I am positive, if I took a poll right now, probably 100% of you will say cold calling doesn't work anymore. 100% of every speech I've ever given, people have said cold calling doesn't work anymore. Why does that? In a grander scheme of things, people are not being sold anymore. People are given the opportunity to buy, meaning that you cannot sell people on your product anymore. You provide them the opportunity to buy your product. So you need to be in as many places and fill as many needs as possible so they see the opportunity to buy your product. So when we come to that, we'll talk about how do we actually close that sale. Basically, in a nutshell, the easiest thing about your product has to be buying it. If you have the user-friendliest product in the world and it makes the iPhone and BlackBerries and all, put them to shame as to how much people are in love with it, but it's very difficult to buy, you're not going to make it. The easiest thing, you got to put priorities first. Easiest thing about your product has to be buying it. Then it has to be using it. Because otherwise, if you don't have a product that stands on its own, you're going to go through all this customer acquisition costs, you're going to have a massive churn, you're going to never get a return on your investment. Just to let you know how religious we are about it, in our company, unless there's a very large company and they require like a 2-year, 3-year contract, we do not allow contracts. We have our company work on a 30-day, month-to-month contract. Why? So that every one of our staff members knows that our butt is on the hook. If our product isn't good, in 30 days, they could all go away. We are not holding them hostage with some contract. We have to win their hearts over. We can't hold it over and with shackles. So therefore, we actually put more money where our mouth is, and everything is 30-day. So our product has to be good, and we are a service company. And in a service company, you're as good as your last service. You could go to a steakhouse 50 times and have fantastic steak, but the 51st time you have a bad steak and you get, some plate with some, hair on it or something, you're never going back. You will never remember you had 50 good steaks there. You'll remember the last 51st time that you did it. So you're in a service business, you're good as your last interaction with a customer, so you have to have your product stand by its own, otherwise you won't make it. It'll be too competitive for you. So how do we achieve all this? And all this automation, is that rhetoric, or did we actually do something to do it? And what we did was we actually developed some technologies that are patent pending. By the way, if you ever do patent, make sure that you put a ton of money aside, because you wouldn't believe how expensive patents are, especially if you do internationally. Like almost every country is $5,000. So it's just ridiculous. What we did was we created, just fulfilling the vision back from 1994, we created Sky Desktop. And Sky Desktop is a cloud-based desktop. It's a place where people go and they get basically a home for all the cloud applications. People have their own local desktop, and people have Citrix, and they could sync to their desktop and everything like that, but they don't have a place that is a pure cloud, and it's a place for them to go and see all their applications and use their applications. So with the cloud desktop, which ours is called Sky Desktop, what you do is you not only have applications that we provide, speaking, just basically practicing what we just preached. We also have applications from third party that are all cloud-based. And if we don't have a relationship with a company, we actually have an opportunity for you to go ahead and bring in your other cloud applications and use it through our desktop. So that's where it is. And one of the benefits of Sky Desktop is that people, and our existing users are really loving this, is that they don't have to replenish the hardware all the time, because with a desktop, either through viruses or getting slow or whatnot, every 2 years, maybe 3 years at the most, they had to replenish the entire hardware for their entire company. But now all the computing power is in the cloud, and all the hardware does is just display in the browser. So you could use this 8-year-old computer and it still works, and works beautifully. So I'm at 27 minutes, so I'm going to try to wrap it up in the next 4 minutes. So the second piece of our solution was Sky App Market. And Sky App Market is a sales solution where basically you go in there and you could go ahead and purchase applications for your organization. And it's smart enough that you could have administrators buy it, people buy it on their own, or have a combination thereof. And there's some patent pending, one-click provisioning. And basically the other thing that we put in there that I'm not sure if there's around, but we put a concept of a retrial, and that is if you go ahead for a 30-day trial with an application but you don't buy it in some given time, and it's different for each application, but on average it's about 6 months. In 6 months, if you go to try it again, we don't say you've tried it before. We let you do another 30-day trial. The reason is it's cloud. In 6 months, it's probably changed a ton, and it might now address your need. So that's what we've done. Now, the next slide is what you guys are going to love, and that is this entire technology is private labeled. And why do we do this private labeled? Because if companies such as yourselves or other resellers, just like we talked about the Heinz ketchup model, is they could offer this of their own. They will not do a good job selling our product, but they would do a fantastic job selling their own product. So we private label 100% down to what the logo is, what the site is, the domain is. We have our own help, and the help talks about Sky Desktop and Sky App Market, but even that is available to people to go ahead and rearrange the words and do global search and replace and put their own brand in there. And we've also made sure our developer contracts are smart enough that, with most developers that offer their product into our solution, we give them 50-50, but in the case where we go for a reseller is 30-30-40, so that our resellers are always guaranteed a cut, so that everybody knows that all of a sudden I'm going to go ahead and offer this product, I'm going to offer it as my own, and I'm going to make some money, and I'm going to address the first need that we talked about, is making more money in my existing clients and existing relationship. So timeline, while we've had it around for about a year or so with our existing client, making sure that we beta testing and everything is very, very fluid. We are going to actually launch it on November 15th, and the sneak previews have been absolutely complimentary. We have had so many comments that my productivity has gone up, and now I love it, and I don't have to look around anymore. I got a trusted source for my cloud software. Lots of accolades that makes us work even harder because we are very, very excited about it. So if you're new to the market and you want to start making making money off the cloud, here's basically the short list of the recommendation. I'm going to go ahead and talk about how to fast track your market entry. So basically, one thing we start talking about is that people would not, if they don't have a need, they want a free software. So many people just offer free software. But on your end of the spectrum, if you don't know how to monetize from your free software, you're not going to survive. This is not the 1990s. We need to have a way to monetize people. And if you have a grand plan, great. But if not, you need to make sure you address that first. And then the other idea is that how do I use the masses of paid users? And we talked about the partnerships, the OEMs, and you being a part of various app markets. I strongly recommend you look at that. But you need to know that by being in an app market, there is no shortcut. You need to make sure that you still tell your story as to why are you different than the other solution, and why is yours better, and why are you, basically, you have to, in one sentence or better, tell me as a customer, why are you fulfilling a need for me? Because remember, nobody is selling anymore. We're just providing an opportunity for them to buy. So part of the other thing we talked about is none of us are big enough to have the total solution. So we have to be partnership ready. If you're not willing to partner with people, you're not going to survive. We are not Google, we're not Apple, we're not Microsoft, and we're not Adobe. But all of the companies I mentioned above partner with other people. Even they recognize that it's too big for them to do it on their own. You have to be partnership ready. You have to be able to have APIs or use other people's API. If you have only 3 developers, make sure one of them at least is the person who's in charge of integration with other people, because you're not going to reach the masses that you need to reach unless you're part of a larger solution. And the other thing we need to talk about is that you need to create some infrastructure in terms of escalation and tiered support and everything. But that all comes in, you have a little bit of time. That comes at 30 to 60 days later after you've established a partnership. But your first thing is you need to be partnership ready, and you need to aggressively go after these partnerships. And part and parcel of that is you don't get to eat the entire pie. The pie is going to be, everybody's heard about this pie, I get a smaller piece of a bigger pie and all that kind of stuff, and it all sounds like gobbledygook, and it comes in one ear and out the other one. But in reality, the idea behind it is that if you are not capable of making money with the percentage there and delegating some of the sales costs, some of the support costs, some of the marketing costs, the reaching the masses costs to other people, you're not going to be able to do it. And the reason for this is that developers are by and large excellent at what they do in development, and by and large they're notoriously awful in sales and marketing because they're in love with their technology, and of course if I'm in love with it, everybody's going to buy it. But the idea behind it is that you need to be able to do that revenue share and get with other people. So I tried to wrap it up in 30 minutes, and I'm open for any questions.